All right. Welcome again back to the most current episode of Hard Points, the podcast about energy security and the startup economy, and of course, how they continue to intersect and to shape the world around us. Each week, we unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and why it matters to you. My name is Mike Smith. I'm joined here today by my perennial co-host, Neal Rickner. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. Neal, how was your weekend?
Good recovery, man. I had my board meeting last week, and Friday was like one of those days, just might as well not have done anything because I tried to do a few things and I was so worthless that it was just worn out, man. So this weekend was recovery. I spent Saturday just kind of trying to catch up, and we did a few fun things on Sunday, but man, it was just mostly rest.
That's good. Yeah, board meetings for people that have never had to deal with it are they're a lot. It's kind of like having 10 bosses all in the same room, all of them like that, are very smart at what they're doing, and they have very explicit opinions about like how they like to do things, and you better show up knowing your material.
Yeah. It's funny. My 11-year-old asked me this question too. He's like, "Dad, I thought you were the boss." And I was like, "Well, everybody's got a boss, man. Like I'm the boss, but I report to this board. And also I'm a member of the board. So that's confusing to an 11-year-old. He's like, wait, so you're on the board and the board is your boss? I'm like, yes, it's very complicated.
It's a whole thing of governance there. It's important for a company to have somebody that's looking over the CEO's shoulder and being like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Also, they're smart people that like can give you like, a good strategic vision about like where you're fitting into things. And it can be, as a CEO, you can have a tendency to want to focus on the operations and get down into the little nitty-gritty details. But the job of the CEO is to be out at the strategic level and to kind of keep that aloofness and vision for the whole company. And the board can help to remind you that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I actually specifically have a section of the board meeting that is board requests. Because to your point, everybody should have oversight. I want oversight over myself. Selfishly, it's so I'm not off in left field, doing something stupid that I'm not aware of. The board is there to kind of kick me back in the right direction if I'm headed off on the wrong one. But then in addition to that, I specifically try to ask them for help on specific things that only they can do.
Yeah, that's great. My most recent board meeting, I knew I had all the pieces that I needed for like a salesperson, but it was like this super clear signal that came out of it. Like, you need to go hire a salesperson. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Need to move that up the priority stack a little bit. I was focused on like the existing team rather than on expanding the team.
Yeah. So how was your weekend, man?
Not awesome. This was my mother-in-law Carol's memorial service was on Saturday. And so I did kind of a lot of planning for that. We had a lot of family that flew in. And it was great to see them all, love them all. Friday, we had everybody over to the house, plus we had some friends. So we had like 30 people over for like a cookout, which was fun. But, there was a little bit of a kind of cleanup. And then
that's a lot of work.
And then being the in-town family we were kind of directly responsible for a lot of the coordination of the service and all of that. And then somewhere along the way, I got a little bit of food poisoning.
Oh no!
Yeah. It was
oh man!
Not debilitating enough that I was out of circulation, but just I felt, not well most of the weekend. So
that is freaking terrible. I hate that. That's the worst.
So that said, we did kind of come up with a plan. Lindsay had some time off that she had previously scheduled before all this, and originally we were going to be doing a family reunion back on the East Coast for something, but that's kind of fallen through because everybody burned up all their vacation time. So we have the makings of a plan, and I've got to plan this out this week, is next week we're going to go backpacking in the San Juans in Southwest Colorado. And there's this really cool thing that my co-founder here at Acclimate, William, turned me on to. You can take the historic train, the Durango to Silverton train. It goes up to this old mining town, Silverton. And they can drop you off halfway in the woods. Apparently, they'll just like, yep, here's good. And so we're going to use that, and we're going to get dropped off to go backpacking. So you get to kind of like cheat your way deeper into the wilderness a little bit without having to hump it in there.
That's awesome, especially if they can drop you uphill somewhere.
Exactly. Exactly. So you get a little bit of the uphill out of the way. You're going to be deeper into the woods. And yeah, so, it'll be great. And, it's just really unique, like take a train to go backpacking sort of scenario. The
That
only
is
the flip of
cool.
it is when you're on the way out, you have to flag the train down. You have to be back
Oh.
there by a certain time, and they teach you like a certain hand signal or something to say, "Hey, stop the train. Let me get on."
I think you want to be paying attention when they tell you the signal, because otherwise you're humping out whatever many miles that is.
Yeah, exactly. But William says it's not that big of a deal, and it's a lot of fun. So we're gonna go do that. And
Very
Durango's
cool.
it's a little far removed. It's like 6.5 hours. It's in the same state, but the West is a big place, and the Colorado's full of a lot of mountains, so you kind of have to drive around them to get to where you're going. And so it would take 6.5 hours for us to get to Durango. And so that's normally like more than you'd want to do for like just a 3-4 day backpacking trip. But if you've already got the week off, you might as well kind of make a whole journey of it, right?
Yeah. No, that sounds amazing. I've been wanting to get out camping this summer, but it is just not worked out. I think I shared a couple of weeks ago that I've got some dad guilt around that, because we did do a vacation. It's not like we didn't do anything, but I really want the boys to have more time in the woods like I did when I was growing up. It was super important to me. And I just don't know. We've got this fundraise going on, and honestly, it's good and bad that the VC world just woke up over the last couple of months. There's some commentary about why. I think it's that the new administration came in February. I started testing the waters in like February, March, and everybody was just like, we're not deploying right now. Going to sit it out for a bit. And then more recently we went out, and the response has been incredible. And the best I can tell is like everybody was waiting for HR1, the big beautiful bill, to drop. And even though it's bad, and it's really bad, at least now there's clarity, so they can jump in. So what the VC world usually goes to sleep, especially in August, but mid-July onward until about Labor Day, there's just nothing going on. And I will tell you, it is not the case right now. And every VC will tell me that. They're like, oh yeah, like we cannot be off like we usually are. We are actively deploying right now. So I don't know.
That's pretty fascinating. I share an office with a friend, a guy named Tim Timmerbat, and Tim's Tim. Tim's in the VC space, but he also talks about kind of the macro cycles associated with how politics drives like public equities markets, and that public equities typically have kind of a little bit of a up year following an election, but gently up. They tend to be very quiet in an election year, but they tend to make their biggest growth in the interstitial years, the years 2 and 3 of a presidential administration, year 1 instead of year 1 and 4. And that's literally driven because like now there's clarity around policy, and the markets will adjust and then execute on it. So we'll see about that.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
All right. We're going to try something new this week. Instead of getting you the news you need in one segment where I just kind of talk at Neal and he has to stare at me, we're going to be each of us introducing a topic, give you a little bit of background perspective, and we're going to open a discussion on that. So it should be a little bit more of a conversational way of doing things. Neal, you ready to get going on this?
Yeah. Not that looking at you is awful. It's great. I have no problems.
I clearly have a face made for radio.
Well, you've got a voice for radio, though. You're good. You make up
for it.
So I thought I'd kick it off with the Golden Dome. I actually, it was in the big, beautiful bill. It didn't even hit my radar for 2 weeks after that bill passed. So Big Beautiful Bill Act, it's actually the name of the bill. HR1 is the other name for it. Included funding for the Golden Dome. And if you've heard about the Iron Dome, which is the Israeli version of this, it's essentially meant to be a missile defense system. And it's got to be a system to handle both, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and then also hypersonics and other, nuclear weapons that would potentially be used to attack the United States. And, look, this idea has been around for a long time. There was a version of, what was called Star Wars at the time in the Reagan administration. So it's not a new concept, but it is a different scale now. There's some funding in the bill to get started on it, but the CBO estimates are that it's going to be 160 billion up to maybe 500 billion and take 10 years to build. I thought it'd be interesting to get your take on it, given you did targeting for the Navy back in the day. How do you see this developing as a defense system? Pluses and minuses here. And I mean, set aside for a minute that we'll come back to the expensiveness of it, but is it going to work?
I'm skeptical. So it's worth talking about the physics of how all of this stuff works, right? So in the case of it, like an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile that's being launched from, say, North Korea or Russia or something along those lines, right? It's a missile that's being sent into space, right? And so it's being launched up out of the atmosphere. It goes into some sort of like glide as it effectively orbit around the Earth, and then it deorbits and it comes down with a whole, bucket of smack on it, ready to, it's dropping from
that means moving fast, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's moving really fast, and then it can drop a lot of different warheads associated with that. So there's some really big kind of ballistics sort of stuff that's going on with that. And there's kind of like three phases in which you can hit a missile that's doing that. First one is it's coming off of the pad as it's getting to launch. That's potentially when it's at its most predictable, because you know where it's coming from, and you know that it's generally its direction of travel. You can hit it when it's in space, so when it's kind of up in orbit associated with that, or you can try to hit it in the terminal phase as it's coming down and trying to hit the target. In each of them have kind of their own ballistics challenges associated with them. The first one, if you're trying to hit it when it's coming off of launch, is usually that's in like a different country, and so and it's running away from you, right? So you're having to chase this missile down as it's going up. You're probably not going to be able to do that unless you can get really close to the launch, just because of all the kinematics associated with chasing it down. Maybe. On the flip side, as it's coming down, you know the defended area that you're working with, and that's why the Iron Dome has worked so well in Israel. Israel's a country, but it's a really small country, like
size of New Jersey.
Yeah, it's not big, right? And it knows where everything's kind of coming from, and so like that's a pretty simple physics question for Israel. They don't have to defend from missiles coming from the west. They have to defend from missiles coming from the east. And so they know the vector that it's coming from. They don't really have to worry about missiles coming from the south or from the north. It's really just from one kind of sector. So they can build all their radar systems and all their missile launch systems in order to be able to interact with that. That's still really hard. And so if you're off axis, so if the missile's coming from the east, ideally, you want to be present east-west of that missile, because it's easier to hit a target that's going directly at you than it, or over top of you to hit behind you than it is to kind of be off axis. Because when you do that, then like it's a lot easier. Imagine trying to just like shoot a bullet that's in midair. If you know if you can remove as many of the variables of that bullet, you can aim at it that way. But if you're trying to hit it sideways, there's a big timing issue to it too, right?
Yeah. Let me interject real quick, because I think one thing that we learned as pilots was that the energy necessary to do the maneuvers at these very high speeds and therefore high G rates means there's just not a lot left over. If for example, a surface to air missile was trying to shoot down a missile coming at it, a small change from the missile coming in requires a big energy output from the missile going up. And there just isn't that much margin. There's not that much extra energy in those missiles coming up, right?
Yeah, that's right. And you can kind of get over that hump by throwing a lot of explosives at it, right? A bigger boom will help. But
who doesn't want that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, that's fun. But it also takes energy to lift that boom up into the air, right? Like the bigger, the more explosive of a warhead you're putting up there, and so typically that's not worth the trade off, right? What you want is better guidance and tracking, and a relatively small boom because you want to use that energy in other ways. Um, so that's pretty hard. And then if you want to like shoot down something in space, then you got some real problems. So the Navy has the capacity for that. We have the SM-3 missiles. And we've done some of that, but like you're kind of you're not kind of you're absolutely like shitting where you eat when you do that because like the US like runs space mostly. Um Something like 85% of the mass that gets put into orbit is done by the United States, right? And so if you're blowing things up in space, what you're doing is limiting the ability to even use space because now you have all this debris that's flying all over the place, fucking up our satellites, fucking up, our ability to put people into, to go out on, occupy Mars or whatever. So that becomes like a real big problem. It's a safety issue. And so you might be able to do that. But again, the kinematics for that become really hard because you're talking about putting a rocket into space, into intersecting, like the velocities that happen when something's in orbit is like, I want to say it's like something like 24,000 miles an hour, if I remember. And so it's just really, really fast stuff. And it's not easy to maneuver around up there either. You don't even have the leverage of the atmosphere in order to be able to get lift associated with that. So now you have to, it's direct energy consumption in order to change direction. And if, that's why, professional baseball pitchers get paid so much money is because if you can bend a baseball, going 100 miles an hour, you're doing something pretty amazing. Now imagine it's going 24,000 miles an hour. It just gets hard, really, really hard. So the US is a big place. We have, it's more than the lower 48 too. Like we have, US states that are in, up near the Arctic, which like the orbital dynamics are going around the poles is really difficult as well for a lot of reasons. We got Hawaii, which is much closer to like a North Korea, and so would require its own system that maybe that's a little bit more of a point defense kind of capacity. We're not even talking about Guam, which is essential to like the defense of Taiwan. Like, what's the scope that they're talking about here? I'm incredibly skeptical that this is technically feasible, actually.
Yeah, I'm in the same spot. I think, and I just looked it up. The U.S. is 400 times larger, more than 400 times larger than Israel. I think just it's the physics that scared me here. Like I know that we've improved technology since my flying days. Hypersonic missiles, which are capable of ballistic missile, distances, but they don't go all the way up into space. They essentially have more maneuverability. Again, there's sort of like more energy into a missile system that has therefore more maneuverability. Those programs have made substantial progress. I think our ability to track and to communicate has all gotten better. I think where I get stuck is where what I asked you before is just like the margins on the amount of extra energy available are so thin. Just look at SpaceX or Rocket Lab that, when they're putting things into space, they're just barely getting there, right? They're not coming with the, hundreds of extra kilograms of spare capacity. They're just barely getting into space, and therefore, they just don't have the extra maneuverability, which makes intercepting something exceptionally hard. The second thing, I'll actually zoom out a bit. For me, the premise here is mutually assured destruction. Like that has always been the deterrent. Like nuclear weapons are so powerful that we are only safe because we promised the world that if they hit us with a nuclear bomb, we're going to hit them with a nuclear bomb. That standoff has stood the test of time, and it's been 70 years now, and it has preserved the peace. I think to your last point there about like, what about Guam? What about Hawaii? You would have to have 100% assurance that this system would work in all the places we needed it to. So there's a logic breakdown here for me where, like if you're if you're willing, if what you're saying here is like, we're going to be more willing to use nuclear weapons than other people because we have this golden dome, or take it a step back, we're just going to be more willing to threaten to use nuclear weapons because we have this golden dome. People are going to have to believe that the golden dome actually works, and we better believe that it actually works, or we're going to be sacrificing some American citizens. So I don't see how, if you start with it's not going to be 100% foolproof, then you back it out to what are we really getting for this maybe $500 billion that we're going to spend?
Yeah. It's worth thinking about, like, if you launch an ICBM and, there is a probability of its route of travel, right? We generally know where they're coming from as far as,
Okay. Yeah.
there's only certain amounts of them. And unless you want to give even more warning associated with that in a kind of a mutually assured destruction kind of mindset, where instead of going the shortest path, you maybe go a different path, a different kind of orbit around the Earth in order to get to your target. So then, maybe you can start controlling for a few of those routes and start putting assets there. North Korea, if it wanted to launch against the United States, would have to launch, assuming that we don't care about Hawaii or Alaska, which they probably have to assume that in this particular case, that like Hawaii and Alaska are sacrificial states, for the defense of certain spots in the United States, maybe of high import. Then we can know, okay, well, North Korea is probably going to be launching, fairly close to, the route of travel becoming fairly close to southern Alaska. Russia's probably going over top of Alaska, assuming that they don't want to nuke Alaska itself. Maybe you can talk about that. Like, so there might be some capacity there for defending like high value assets.
Yeah, but we have important stuff in those. I mean, we're on Guam for a reason. We have Hawaii. Sorry. I mean, I love Hawaii, but we're not, Hawaii is not a state just because it's got great beaches and great people. It has those things too. But let's be clear, like the United States wanted Hawaii for strategic reasons.
Sure, but they're also Americans. Like we
yeah.
part of this contract that we have as a country is that like they matter just as much as the people in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
Right. And if we start talking about sacrificial states, like we're starting to kind of like fundamentally erode the contract there. Now they've always kind of been in that role a little bit. There's a reason Pearl Harbor happened at Pearl Harbor. So like I think the people of Hawaii and Alaska also know they're kind of on, like, Alaska literally is called the last frontier. But still, they deserve every bit of protection that every other American does. So, I worry a little bit about the kind of the contract there. I think the bigger thing here is the vanity of it, the golden dome. Of course, King Midas here wants to call this thing the golden dome because he he literally sits on a golden toilet. So that seems a little.
I gotta get me one of those someday. I want to sit on a golden toilet.
Yeah, well, like everything with that guy, it's really just a veneer to cover up the fucking his shit streaks. So, oh
man,
there's we'll kind of see about it, but it's a lot of money. The U.S. policy for years and years and years, we stood behind our oceans. And then we realized kind of the hard lesson is that when we become defensive, when we go to our soil and we start disengaging from the world, that's inherently actually bad for us. And that's my bigger concern about this is the idea of that, like, we are disengaging from the world and we're going to try to stand behind our oceans. And that's just not going to work for a lot of reasons, physics mainly being one of them. And it makes the world poorer. It reduces the US's capacity to kind of set the tone for where the world needs to be going. It doesn't work. And I just don't like it from that reason either.
As a prime example of it doesn't work, I know the next thing you're going to talk about is Chinese rising share of advanced industrials. This is one of the things that I think connects directly in is that if we're insulating ourselves, we're insulating ourselves not just from China, our so-called enemies, China, Russia, Iran. We're also insulating ourselves from our friends, and we're going to need our friends if we're going to balance out what's happening in China. So you want to take us to topic 2?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing we wanted to talk about here for topic 2 is China's the growth of China, specifically in its share in advanced industries. Neal, you and I are both old enough to remember before, like back in the 90s, there was this big thing about like giving China most favored nation trading status. And that was what really, in many ways, kind of opened up the ability for China to engage with the West as kind of the hub of manufacturing. Historically, the communist parties of various countries have had these 5-year plans. China's persists to this day, and they've been very, very strategic about like how they wanted to continue to operate in the world. And it reminds me a little bit about like what we used to see. Um, I think it was like in Back to the Future, the movie Back to the Future, and they're um, like Marty McFly goes back and Doc Brown's talking about like how all this junky cheap stuff is coming out of Japan. Like, and this is like in 1950s, Marty, Doc Brown. And then in 1980s, like all the nicest electronics were coming out of Japan. It was the hub for the nicest stuff that was manufactured. And China kind of took that playbook and executed it. They started with like all this, kind of janky baubles, and a lot of our janky little baubles still come from China. But they were very deliberate about like the taking things that the U.S. had fostered, and then that we fucked up in the end game about like actually taking and owning this industry for forever, because we wanted it to be manufactured somewhere else, because we didn't really support manufacturing enough in the United States. And as a result, China now runs these things, and frankly, they're the industries of the future. It's solar panels, it's batteries, it's EV production, everything that is like manufacturing of the future, industries of the future. It's now being made in China, and so I think it's worth kind of like talking about like where do we go from here? Like, what are we doing? What do you think about this, Neal?
Yeah, I mean, I start with what kind of manufacturing jobs. We have been talking over the last few months about bringing manufacturing back, but what? We've got 13 million, by some counts, 13 million manufacturing workers. It's not even. I mean, we're a country of 350 million people, so this is already a fairly small segment. We could try to bring back textiles, t-shirts and socks and, stuff you use around the house. But, those things don't cost very much. And therefore you can't pay the people who make those things very much. They're also not the growth industries. If you want to build something, build in an industry that's getting bigger. It's much harder to displace an existing company that's already perfected a product than it is to go build something new. And so that's what you just said, like EV cars, people love them. Not everybody has even driven one, but the biggest predictor of buying an electric vehicle is if you've already had one. So people love EVs. At some point, we'll have more and more EVs. They won't work everywhere because, lots of Americans live in places like you were talking about at the beginning of the show, where you drive in 6 hours. That's harder, not impossible, but it's harder if you got to go further distances. But take EVs, for example. That is an area where you could do great innovation. You could, with the right sort of structure, spread, like take Tesla and open up the world. And oh, by the way, we started to do that, and now we're kneecapping Tesla. It's part of why I think Elon fell out with Trump is because he saw some of that happening. But that's an example of like, do we want to make t-shirts and socks, or do we want to make electric vehicles? The clear answer to that is electric vehicles.
Yeah, so there's this component of like, I think where did the U.S. go? Like, it's worth pointing out that like when we granted most favored nation trading status to China, there was kind of a rising tide lifted all boats sort of feature there, right? Which is that China's economy grew massively. It's actually the thing most responsible for the alleviation of poverty in the world. 800 million Chinese people moved out of poverty, which is like an unalloyed, like good news story. Like if you can reduce human suffering on the planet, that's great. So at the same time, the US economy grew faster. And a big part of that, I think, is around the idea of software. And so I'm a software guy, right? So it's worth kind of talking about this. A few years back, they had the Pokemon Go thing. And I remember sitting on my porch. I live in a neighborhood here in Denver. It's, single family homes, but like it's relatively dense. And so there's a lot of people kind of walking around. And I saw people, using their little phones for augmented reality to go catch some little creature. And like, at the time I was thinking about like a couple things. One was like, I'm just glad people are getting outside and going for a walk, even if it is to play a video game. But the other one is the idea that capital flows. Like, where does money go? So when we were younger, if you like Hollywood was like a big industry. And so what would happen with Hollywood, the reason Hollywood was such a big industry is because it was a way for money from all over the planet to go to California, right? You could make a big thing there, you get millions of dollars all over the world to flow into California, Southern California in particular. Same thing with the music industry, right? Like these were like IP, they were kind of like the software of their time almost, right? It was intellectual property that the US defended very heavily in its most favored nation trading status with China, for example, because it was a way that we brought in a lot of money. Now, in those times, like even like in the small towns, you still had like a movie theater, right? Some of that money stayed in the economy. You had people that were buying popcorn or making, and then you had people that had to make the popcorn. You had to have somebody tear the ticket. You had to do all the things, right? There was a movie theater. But with the advent of software, more and more and more, a higher and higher percentage of that capital moves into fewer and fewer places. San Francisco, Tokyo, etc. It didn't cost you anything to download that Pokemon Go. If there was any sort of revenue that was generated from it, then it all went to Tokyo. Right? That's how that worked. Nintendo got all the money, every dollar associated with that. And it displaced things where you might have been spending money to go to a movie theater, for example. Or it displaced other things where like that money didn't leave your community at all. And so that's how the US made its money over the last few years. That's the reason that like all the biggest players now in public equities are all huge software companies that have found a way to kind of collect revenue from all over the planet and centralize it in the United States. But the real world doesn't run on software. There's still a need for things. And that's where we need to be increasingly focusing on this, right? Is that like, I think we need to retain like that capacity for software and other intellectual property sort of scenarios that bring all this revenue in. But also we need to be focusing on like the high margin, high tech manufacturing that is going to be our future economy. Because like it or not, we live in a climate constrained world. This is happening. The physics is also just driving this. I'm glad that President Trump's at least nodding towards manufacturing, but it's worth pointing out a couple of things here, which is one, the second largest manufacturer on the planet is the United States already. The second thing to point out there is that manufacturing had remained flat in Trump 1.0 and had doubled under Biden. So I'm skeptical about, especially because he's moving money away from like these more advanced manufacturing things with the big ugly bill, torpedoing a lot of the IRA. I'm just like skeptical like that the U.S. is going to do this. I think if anything, we've intentionally torpedoed our future to the benefit of China.
Yeah. So as the energy guy, we're likely to spend, the planet is likely to spend trillions of dollars on new energy generation in the coming couple of decades. And so, yeah, I mean, China has a head start in solar panel production. But it's not as though we couldn't come back. It's the same with batteries. And so the reason you saw that bump is that for all the things that Biden did wrong, one of the things he did right was it was a push pull. He left the tariffs in place on these specific items, and in some cases increased tariffs on specific items from specific places. And then at the same time provided the subsidy structure to be able to generate the industry growth here in America. That was the IRA. So now we've got not targeted tariffs, but a lot of tariffs, and we've destroyed the incentives to build these new industries. I mean, that bring it all together. That is the if you want to build stuff here, physical things here, go after an industry that's growing faster than any other. I mean, AI is outpacing everything, but right after AI is energy. And then have a coherent industrial policy that gives you both the carrot and the stick to transition some of that manufacturing capacity to America.
The strategy of the Chinese 5-year plan without being, a bunch of communists.
We should also pause and say, like, for all the things that, I get a little, I don't know, prickly about this. Like, China has the authority to move quickly and to do things unilaterally. I hope nobody hears that from me that I prefer that system over ours. There's so much wrong with the Chinese system that, for example, any company that operates in China, essentially, if the Chinese government wants to come in and take from that company, that is within their right. So there is not freedom. The government essentially has first rights on anything that's produced in a Chinese company, which is what makes it such a threat to do business with any Chinese companies. So that make no mistake that there's the Chinese are an adversary in my mind, for a reason. This is also one. We got to support American industry and try to support our own economy. But two, China's a real threat for a number of reasons, not just their economic, but also how their government operates.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, like the abuse of what they've done to the Uyghurs and a bunch of other different minority populations. Not to say that we're doing so great on that right now, but ourselves, but like that alone should be disqualifying. There's also like the innovation gap, which is the Chinese do a really, really good job of taking what we've developed and then maximalizing it, right? They learned off of like the Tesla manufacturing how to build by BYD. And I've ridden in a BYD one time when I was down in Mexico. It's a great car, and it's very affordable. And like they took that, but they didn't develop that. They're going to start closing that gap a lot. I mean, we are defunding science in the United States and they are not. So they're going to start closing that gap because we've, instead of decided to play to our strengths, we've decided to try to, compete at the same game that they're doing, which I don't think is the right way to do this. And there's certain things, like, to pivot a little bit here, which is are probably fairly low margin, but like are strategically important. Rare earths, for example, are like a really important thing. And like, we just don't have enough we have plenty of resources here, but we don't have enough supply because we haven't developed them out for a lot of reasons, mainly because it was just cheaper to let the Chinese do it. So, we probably need to be focusing on some of those things. But, some of one of my least favorite people on this planet is Mark Andreessen. And he likes to talk about, I'm sure he's an avid listener of Hardpoint. So a little while ago, he came out with like this treatise about like it's time to become builders. And like the guy's never supported actual builders at all himself. And it's because like he has like this software vision of the world rather than like actually what it takes to build like truly hard things and to do it the right way. But I think the larger sentiment does stand. We need to be builders like here in this country. And it bothers me how, like, when we try audacious things right now, on the one side, it's all lockdown and bureaucracy. And on the other side, they're like rooting for it to fail. And like, I think the great example here is like high-speed rail in California. There's the California carbon market throws off a fair amount of money. It was used to fund the development of high-speed rail. And that project ran into so many hurdles that it just took way too long and way too much, and it never got done. And on the one side, like the Republican side, they were cheering and saying, like, see, this is why the government shouldn't be involved in any of this. And you're like, no, that's not really true. Like, we build highways all the time. Like, why can't we build trains? Why can't we do something big like this? Why are you rooting for our country to be failing at improving itself? Like that, what the fuck? Right? But on the other side, there's also like the people that are like defending, like, well, it should take billions and billions of dollars, and it shouldn't take this long. And like, no, like this country needs to get its shit together and be able to do big projects. We used to do big projects all the fucking time. You know, we talk about the moonshot. Like if we can put people on the moon, we can certainly build a fucking train from LA to San Francisco, but we don't. And meanwhile, the Chinese have built a huge high-speed rail network, and it's to their benefit. That country is benefiting from that investment in that capacity, and we're losing because we now have to, fly on congested airplanes, and go through the fucking TSA, you know, circus. No shame to the TSA folks, they're public servants, but like it's the whole way it's all structured is absurd. Like it's just we live in the stupidest choice right now. We are doing nothing well.
The stupidest choice. Yeah. Well, actually, that's there's a lot there. I'll say one thing. If you've spent any time in New York or on the trains between, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, you know that trains are just easier, faster, better. Like if I want to fly to San Francisco, it is 6-hour journey and it should be like 2.5, right? It's just inconvenient. I was going to talk about, why me and apparently most of the country is pissed off with the Democratic Party next. So I guess I'll just shift into that because there's a piece of this that's related. And it is, I don't have all the details here, but I have on pretty good authority that, a good chunk of why the rail project in California got derailed, forgive the pun, is because there were a few voices in the mix that instead of just doing sort of the logical, like LA to San Francisco, somebody wanted it to take a detour into another part, like into a town that just didn't make sense. Like a, 50-degree right turn to go hit, Lancaster, essentially. If you don't know the geography, it doesn't matter. The point is, like, Lancaster's not a metropolis. It is a small little town, an important little town, but not worth diverting the train 50 degrees to the right to go, pick up passengers from. It should have just been focused on its original objective, which was to connect LA and San Francisco in the fastest manner possible. And I'm sure there were other reasons, but this whole story starts to unfold in a very believable way where there was just maybe even a good faith effort to include Lancaster, but then drove the whole project into massive delays. And now we are where we are because what is essentially a special interest.
Yeah, it's interesting from a politics standpoint, of like there used to be, because we've been so focused on special interests, like we've actually kind of removed the ability for politicians to make deals to a certain extent. It used to be that you could do a small little pork project, that some politician could say, hey, I'm bringing home the bacon, in order to be able to do kind of like a bigger thing that was more important. So I'm certainly not here defending pork, other than in the form of bacon, which is delicious. Um, but I'm not defending waste but like the ability for us to be able to make deals and to move forward, is like a little bit limited there. It, to me though, is just the idea of like, just like the lack of leadership in the Democratic Party. Like these are supposed to be elected leaders, right? Like we use that language, but they don't lead. Like, matter of fact, a lot of them don't have any experience in actually leading people. Like, some of them know how to make deals, and, like, that's important. But historically, we used to, like, as from the executive side of things, like, it was a for a long time, like, in between, like I think it was in between Kennedy and Obama, there wasn't a single person that came out of the US Senate, that ended up going on to the presidency. There was a couple of people that, like, won their party's nomination. Maybe it was Johnson to Obama. And, it was because, like, the kind of person that does well in, like, a legislature is not actually really a leader. They're more of kind of like a debate, deal-making kind of, like, policy structure associated with that. And the Democratic Party seems to have forgotten, like, what real leadership looks like. And as a result, I think people are pretty pissed with him. Like, the guy that's in charge right now is a fucking clown. Like, we can't beat a clown. You can't, like, we can't tell the whole.
Literally wears makeup like a clown.
Yeah, he wears makeup like a clown. He shits on a gold toilet. Like, the guy's a fucking caricature. Like, he's a clown. You know?
I'll say again, I want to take a turn on the gold toilet, but I digress. This poll that I saw of the weekend is that people are really unhappy with Democrats. They're also really unhappy with the Republic. Both Republicans and Democrats are underwater on immigration, the economy, inflation, foreign affairs, tariffs, and the Russia-Ukraine war. What's shocking is that I'll give you one number, which is like the Democrats are at 33% disapproval. The Republicans are at like 38% disapproval. So I'll put that out there. Nobody's happy with any of it. But I think in the Democrats' case, to your point about lack of leadership, they're just fucking out of touch. We continue to fall in this like world where they are talking at us, talking down to us, and I feel it. And I'm like sort of an upper middle class guy, and I still feel like I'm being preached to, pandered to. I can only imagine if you're a blue collar worker from the middle of America, how it feels to have a, coastal elite sort of with probably good intentions, but it just comes off as, very condescending. I think the other part of it is there's a lot of drama around trans kids and trans kids competing in but like we end up with these quote unquote woke issues that affect very few people, but become superheated. And like, for example, on the trans issue, like I'll just say out loud, like trans kids should be protected. They're among the most vulnerable among us. My heart goes out to anybody who finds themselves in a sort of, in a situation where they're not sure what gender they are. Like my heart goes out to you. At the same time, we've contorted ourselves. 99% of the population is not trans, and we're bending over backwards to, allow trans kids to compete across sports. And like, I just had a debate about this over the weekend. I will say, maybe controversially, I don't think if you're a trans kid, you should be, and you're transitioning from male to female, you should be competing against girls in the sports. But I don't even want to have that debate because again, it's like, this is a very small niche. We should be able to just take care of this very small niche of people in a compassionate way and not get all of our politics drugged down this sort of rabbit hole. I appreciate that there's lots of voices in the Democratic Party, but it just bothers me that we're being talked down to, that we're focused on very, these issues that don't have broad applicability, and we cannot find a leader that can speak with a unified voice and actually lead the Democratic Party into a productive place where they're forming a counter narrative to the Orange Menace.
Yeah. On the issue of trans individuals, like there are people that have done like thoughtful work on this. Like the NCAA has like some good thinking about like how they deal with trans athletes, and that's where this decision should have been lying, is kind of at that level, right? This is not a federal level discussion. right? And I would also push back just slightly, which is to say they're not that small of a minority. I have trans friends, and they're good people. They try not to make a fuss of it. Like, matter of fact, if anything, they're being made the fuss up. And I think that's where the issue is that we're letting, people's natural, like, this is new, this is uncomfortable, pronouns, what the fuck is that? Like, and, frankly, I think everybody would acknowledge, anybody that, it's worth having in the conversation, that, like, yeah, this is an adjustment and it's going to take a little time for everybody to adjust. And when you sit and think about it and you want to stand up to bullies, yeah. So it's going to take time to adjust. But because of that natural, it becomes an obvious and easy culture war issue. And we're letting people set that debate for us rather than focusing on the idea of, like, no, like, this country is being robbed to pay for gold toilet shitters. And it's being robbed of your future and of your kids' future. And people seem to be, like, wanting to focus on, like, debate issues.
That's my point. I think we're making the same point. I think we got pulled into this, like Trump ran the most ads he ran was on this trans issue.
Yep.
And so I guess what I'm driving at is, like, I understand the pushback, especially if you're from middle America and you don't know any trans people yourself. That issue sort of pulls at you emotionally. Like, why? Like, how are we allowing, puberty blockers on 10 and 11-year-olds? Holy shit. I have that response. Like, I understand that sentiment and emotion, but the outcome of that is the one big and beautiful bill, which essentially takes healthcare away from people who need it, gives a tax break to billionaires, and is just awful for the country in so many ways. This is why I'm pissed at the Democratic Party, because they didn't have a coherent vision for the country that could navigate with leaders, as you bring up, with leaders who can navigate how to articulate with the path forward. They're totally inept. And also, I should acknowledge bad policy. I've said it before. I think Biden's border policy was terrible. People surrounding Biden that didn't tell the full story of his cognitive capabilities was awful. I mean, there's awful things down a long list. The consequences of it, though, are what pissed me off the most, which is that we now have a grifter in the White House who is signing awful laws that are bad for us. He's signing awful laws into being.
Yeah, I think it's all one coherent. It's actually the whole conversation we've had today, starting right from the beginning here, when we were talking about, like, the job of the CEO and, like, what the board is. The president has a boss, and it's you and me, right? In many ways, the president is the CEO of the country, and is responsible to dealing with that. And we're not giving good strategic guidance to him, nor does he actually really care. But the other part of it is what is the job of a political leader? Every one of them kind of, like, within the CEO's role. And one of the things I've come to realize about leadership is that messaging is maybe the most important thing that we do. Giving clear guidance, strategic vision, short sound bites that resonate with people and kind of stick into their heads. And at its shallowest, that's kind of like marketing. It's kind of a Mad Men sort of thing. But at its greatest, like, it can be a clarion call. It can be that's what Kennedy did with the moonshot, right? This is what we're going to do in this decade. We're going to put a man on the moon, right? And people have been, like, really focusing on the idea of kind of the messaging. And so I don't want to get too stuck down into the messaging sort of component there, but, like, a leader should be able to repeat over and over and over the key strategic goal in clear and coherent messaging. And the Democrats just haven't done that. And they've allowed themselves to get distracted on culture war issues that the Democrats are on the right side of, 100%, but it misses from like the unifying theme of like how do we move this country forward. I just the message that came out, using trans people as the whipping boy, for the Republican Party is Democrats don't care about you, they care about they them, right? And it's an evil thing actually to say, because one, it's not true, and two is that it demonizes a couple of people that really like are decent. All my trans friends are decent, hardworking people that don't deserve that bullshit. It's an evil message, but it's clear and it's coherent, and it says I'm fighting for you, even though it's not true, right? And so, like, how are the Democrats, who actually are, in my opinion, predominantly, spending their effort on most of us, how are they losing this fight? And part of it is that they've allowed their messaging to get unclear, but part of it is that they're not as much for the little guys they used to be. And so there's some truth in this too, right? Which is like, Mark Andreessen used to be a donator, donate a lot to Democrats, right? And there was a reason for that. He was getting what he paid for.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of things. I would say I 100% agree that the Democrats have no effective messaging. I also think that they failed to listen, because the majority of them are urban dwellers, not just on the coast, but primarily on the coast and then in the big cities, Chicago, whatever. And they just didn't listen. They just didn't understand what Trump, for all his faults, is a brilliant politician. He uses those rallies to understand what his voters think about, care about. He listens to the applause lines. And for example, Elizabeth Warren and a few others tapped into this like corporate elite angst. Bernie Sanders is really effective on this front. Now, I think Bernie and AOC and Elizabeth Warren go too far. To me, they go to the sort of socialist. A smart politician that was somewhere in the middle and picked up some of what Trump did, which is like the elites are, the deep state, the blame it on the corporate overlords. There's a lot of truth to that, first. And secondly, it is what people care about these days. They are not seeing the wage growth that they once did. They understand that corporates are making tons of money and it's not coming to them. I don't think the Democratic Party heard any of that. If they did, their answer, again, something else I just don't agree with at all that Biden did, was the loan forgiveness program. First of all, like, if you went to college, you signed up for a loan. Why the hell should anybody forgive that loan? I like, on one part, I will say I applauded it only from the perspective of like, the little guy finally got a win. Like, we give all sorts of tax breaks and giveaways to the richest. This was finally like the little guy got a little win. I appreciate that. But also, like, what does it mean to sign your name to a loan document? More importantly is that most of the country didn't go to college or take a loan. So if you're in East Tennessee and, working in a poultry farm, and you see the government giving away billions of dollars to people who went to college, anyway, the Democrats just didn't see that would be offensive to people. And I know it came from a good place, but it just defied logic, and two, it just played really poorly in places like East Tennessee.
Yeah. I mean, I hear that. I also, you should, what you sign up for, you should pay off. But there's some stuff like in the loans that like, you can't, student loans can't be expunged by bankruptcy. You can get out from the loan on your mortgage, on your car, if you get driven into the hole, but you can't do that with like a student loan. Like, and then like the interest rates are like usury, frankly. Like we took kids that were like really impressionable, didn't make the colleges put up any collateral either. Like, in kind of like a vetting process, and it was just like unbacked. And so there was like this predatory component of it. So I think we could like restructure it in a way where it's not a giveaway, but where like you can get out of this with bankruptcy, normal bankruptcy laws, where you can easily refinance, especially when the interest rates were so low. That I think would have been a better way. But again, it is a bit of for certain people, this is a really big deal, right? But it is kind of a distraction from like the bigger picture, which is like this country has enough. It's the wealthiest country in the history of the planet by leaps and bounds. We don't need to have this like crabs in a bucket kind of mindset of like trying to tear one another down when we all should be kind of building up. Um, and you know, um, I think there are some leaders that are out there. I think pound for pound, the best leader, whether you agree with her politics or not, is AOC. Clear messaging. She knows how to go with to meet her audience, and she has. I've been
I
watching
put
her
her in the
mature.
same. Yeah. Sorry, I put her in the same bucket as Trump in some ways. Super effective. I don't disagree with it at all. I just don't agree with her policies. Like I have conservative buddies who are like, I love them. Ideologically, I'm just not aligned. I put myself in the same bucket with AOC. I just am not aligned with where she wants to go, but I agree. Her messaging is effective. She's authentic. She knows who she is and she's going where she's going to go. And I respect that. I respect the shit out of that.
Yeah. I think another one is Pete Buttigieg. I think he's been a very, very coherent and clear messenger. He's also got some executive experience, first as a mayor and then, working within the administration for Biden.
Mm-hmm. And he's a vet.
And he's a vet. He understands like we're all kind of in this together. He signed up to go when a lot of people didn't. But it reminds me.
I'm with you on Pete.
Yeah,
I'm with you on Pete. I think he's well spoken, very middle of the road, very pragmatic, and also importantly, to my previous point, he goes to places where most Democrats don't go. He'll go to Fox News. He'll go to a town hall in rural America. But also I think that's a cycle. Like he's articulate and centered in part because he will talk to everybody.
You got to be there. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has been spending a lot of time on Fox, and he's gotten pretty darn good at making some of those claims. He's also got some executive experience. California, it's its own mess, so I'll reserve judgment on that. But but in part of that is some legacy policies that he's having to work around. So I don't know. But it reminds me of when I was a kid. There was a movie called The American President. It was written by Aaron Sorkin, and it's a little idealistic, right? It's like it is an Aaron Sorkin thing. It's the movie version of The West Wing, if you will. But there's this one period there where they're trying to talk. They're talking about presidential leadership, so in this one example, it talks about like how like they did a tactical bombing of something in Libya for this made up sort of offense. That was realistic in the movie, but not realistic to the real world. And they say, well, that looks very presidential. And he says, well, no, actually, that's like the least presidential thing I did actually today is because like it was all about like tenor and tone. And then they end up going on to talk about like that the people want leadership. And so later on in the movie, he goes, they want leadership. They're so thirsty for it. They'll crawl through the desert towards a mirage. And when they discover there's no water, they'll drink the sand. And people thirst for leadership. They want real leaders. They want to follow you. But in the absence of real leaders, they'll go around whatever they can find. And in that case, it's the fucking buffoon that we have running this whole circus right now. He's not a real leader. He's never led anybody. He's never done anything for anybody ever in his entire life that wasn't to his benefit. And I would challenge anybody to actually illustrate like a case where that's worked or where to challenge that. But people are so thirsty for real leadership, they're drinking the sand, and that sand's name is Donald Trump.
I'd never heard that quote before. It rings true. And he's the most selfish president we've ever had. And it's what's shocking to me is just how much people who support him will defend that. It goes back to something we talked about last week, which is that for them, it's emotional. It's, they've decided to throw in their lot with him because he's the only one articulating a path forward. This is the last thing I was going to share about me being pissed off at the Democratic Party. Me and, again, 67% of the country. It's not that hard, everyone. Like, it's economic security, it's upward mobility, and it's a government that works. Economic security is about wages and inflation and healthcare costs, job availability. That's not that hard. It's affordable energy, affordable housing. I mean, economic security goes back to the Clinton era. It's the economy stupid. Those have to be the centerpiece of, and it's not, again, to go back, it's not like loan forgiveness. It's not a small business incentive that Kamala talked about. Those were all fluff bullshit, whatever. There's got to be a coherent plan around economic security. That leads into, if you got some security, then what's the dream? Why am I working so hard? It's upward mobility. And then thirdly, it's about government that works. Right now, that is at an all-time low. Now, you're not going to be able to solve all that at once, but to your point about leadership, there are think tanks from here to kingdom come that have lots of policy prescriptions on how to do all of these things. Pick some. Like, it's not that hard. Pick some and start talking about it and messaging it like AOC and Trump do. Get that message out there. I think you can articulate a vision that doesn't include the Orange Menace.
Matter of fact, you shouldn't, because the more you elevate the guy, the more you center him, and the less you're on your own ground. I don't even think you need to talk about policy. I mean, I just don't
Yeah, maybe not.
The Trump administration is executing Project, what was it?
2025.
Project 2025.
Yep.
They're executing it. People knew about that before the election. It was written in black and white. You can find it on the internet. All the awful shit they were going to do. None of it very popular with people because it was going to fuck their lives up. And
it was so unpopular that Trump said, "Oh, I didn't even know what Project 2025 is."
Exactly. And then, but he had this larger message. People didn't actually want to look under. They don't want to look under the hood. I mean, really, in a representative, democracy, which we have, it's a democratic republic, but is that you're the boss to these elected leaders, and you're giving them strategic guidance. This is what I need. And they're supposed to go out and look at the policy stuff and make your life better. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And so I don't even think you have to talk about the policies. I think you just need to message it and then back it up with the policies when you're in office and keep beating the drum on that.
I think to the extent that Trump has shown us, and AOC to an extent too, has shown us that you don't have to, all you have to have is concepts of a plan. You don't have to have a plan. But then how about that? Let me retreat a little bit and then say, how about you articulate a vision for economic security, upward mobility, and a government that works? How about that? But we're not talking about that at all. Gavin is some, but basically, Mayor Pete is some. Most of the party is not. There are a couple of congressmen that I could point out too, but it's just so exhausting that they're, as a party, so seemingly directionless right now.
Yeah, and it's we'll just have to leave it there. I think we could rant about it for a while here. All right, man. We're to the part of the show where it's our goods, bads, and others. So why don't you tell me what's going on good in your life, Neal?
Good. Sometimes technology still fascinates me. I got a warning, a notice that the water company had detected a leak in my house. Your water usage started going up, and it's been steadily 7 gallons or whatever. And sure enough, I actually went onto the website. I went down to the daily, hourly usage of my water and figured out. Then I texted my gardener and I was like, "Hey, when were you here?" He said 3:00 on Thursday. And no kidding, at 4:00 on Thursday is when the leak started.
No kidding.
And he could see it in the graph.
Wow.
It's just like, cool, man. The water company doing good work and saving me on my water bill, and also just saving some water that otherwise is going to be wasted.
Yeah,
So,
precious resource in Southern California.
for sure. My bad is that this is the anniversary date. Today is the anniversary date. Lost one of my best friends in the world during undergrad, a guy that kind of took me under his wing and really, I was 19 and he just kind of showed me the way. He was a youth substance abuse counselor. And what he did was he would take these, teens on long river rafting trips. And as a part of that, 2 weeks or so in the wilderness, help them reconnect with themselves, with their addiction, etc. He's just an amazing human being that challenged me in ways that I just will never be able to repay. He did things like he gave me a handwritten book of the Tao being, the sort of Buddhist teachings. He actually took the time to read a chapter or to read a page and then handwrite a version of this in his own pen for me and gave that to me on my birthday one year. I mean, it's just the kind of guy that would, like, who does that? Who has the time to spend whatever it was, 50 hours or something, writing out the Tao? Because he thought it was so important and that I wouldn't read it unless he wrote it for me. And he gave it to me. A couple of years ago, he just woke up with chest pains, told his wife that he had some chest pains and then went back to sleep and then never woke up. And we don't know. He was an athlete. He was in the great shape and shouldn't have been lost when he was. I mean, he wasn't even 50. And anyway, today's the day, July 28th.
That's really hard to deal with. It can be, as I told you, it was my mother-in-law's memorial service this weekend. And, the pastor there talked about like how that can be challenging to one's faith. Like when people that like are just an absolute joy to be around and a benefit to everyone around them and just like a value add to this planet, like leave too soon. So, that's hard to kind of sit with sometimes.
Yeah. So these are my thoughts today. My other, it's just sort of one of those things that like the fundraise is going well. I started by saying that there's a lot of interest. I've got 12 firms in the data room, which is awesome. The data room
is one of them Mark
Andreessen?
No. That's good.
Yeah.
Sorry if he was coming knocking.
For those who not in this space, the data room where you set up like all the files that somebody who's going to invest would need to make their decision, where it's where they do their due diligence. So just the fact that I had 12 firms in there signifies that there's interest and that people are really kicking the tires. And, it's my other because it's like, let's see where it goes. Like, you never know. It could be a good sign and people are ready to jump in.
Birds and bushes, chickens that haven't hatched. There's all the metaphors there for how you shouldn't count any of this yet.
Yeah.
But that's a very promising start. So I'll keep my fingers crossed for you, man.
Thanks.
Well, for me, I want to brag about my family a little bit when it comes to the goods. So my mother-in-law was, I've talked about her kind of at length now on the show a little bit. But I want to brag about my two parents and my two sisters, and about how they showed up for my wife's family. Couple, so 3 of the 4 of them were able to make the memorial service. They were in town for that. The one that wasn't sent a very personal note to my wife, kind of on the day of. That was my sister Katie. She was called away for work, so she couldn't attend. But she separately made a trip herself to see Carol before she passed. Which I thought was just a very intentional kind of part of extending there. My sister Emmy was really involved in actually caring for Carol a little bit. My mother even made like a photo album for my father-in-law of my mother-in-law. And I just am just so fucking proud of my family for just being really authentic and present for somebody that they're only related to because like I fell in love with Lindsay, right? Like completely out of their choice. But no, they just, they knew that my family is their family and they acted accordingly. So I'm super proud of the Smiths.
That's great, man.
On the others or on the bads, I think it's the famine in Gaza. I think we are not talking about this enough, and there are a lot of people that are dying, and all the excuses are bullshit. And we're now in a place where the world's only Jewish nation is committing, if it's not a genocide, it's pretty fucking close. They're intentionally abusing civilian populations in ways that echo to their own history, and it's disgusting. And people are dying. Children are starving to death, and it's only getting worse. And I've got a lot of Jewish friends. This is not attack on Judaism by any stretch. It is the nation of Israel and its government are perpetrating atrocities, and I am pretty disgusted by it.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the images coming out of Gaza, you need to go look. It's just awful.
Yeah. And then, for the others that I'm kind of tracking right now is about how things are going to go for sales. Early indications, we have this account executive, smart guy named Tyler, who's, and more important, very motivated. So seeing how he's got all the ecosystem, all the systems set up, he's learned the product, he's ready to go out there and start hitting the phones and the calls, but he's about to. He hasn't yet.
It's go time.
It's go time, and we're going to see how this bet pays off. I am cautiously optimistic, even a little excited, but I'm also a little nervous because, like, if this doesn't pan out, now I've got to like shift gears and figure out what the fuck's going on now. It'll be a little bit different. Into that mix, I've also got a board meeting this week. Speaking of board meetings, and to talk about a little bit of strategic guidance associated with that, and just being like, hey, here's where we're at. So I'm I'm interested to see about in this period of where we don't fully know the results of that bet, what is some of the strategic thoughts that we can have about like next steps. So a lot to be seen there. So,
man, good luck.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about here.
Yep, that was a good one. That's it for this episode of Hard Points. Thanks for listening and being part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup world. If you found today's episode useful or thought-provoking, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, share it on social media or send it to someone who'd appreciate it. Thanks again for joining us. Hard Points is produced by Jordan Garuso and brought to you by the Valor Media Network. We'll see you next week.